dive into week one, and what a great schedule it is. All 18 teams play. They all play non-conference games, 3 on Thursday night, including 2 here on the Big Ten Network. Rutgers and Illinois in action. We got Jonathan Smith's MSU debut on Friday. 12 games on Saturday, 6 of them on our air. And then we cap it off on Sunday, USC and LSU in Las Vegas. What a loaded weekend. Our countdown to kickoff brought to you by Taco Bell. All gets underway at 6 Eastern Time Thursday when Rutgers hosts Howard, who is preparing for the matchup next to me as we speak.
Yeah,
you got a lot of work to do.
Gotta go.
A lot of excitement about the Scarlet Knights. 7 wins last year, their most in 9 years, including a bowl victory over Miami. Very favorable schedule. No Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, or Oregon. They did get a piece of really bad news this past week, though. Their very talented linebacker, Mohamed Toure, announced he's out for the year. He tore his ACL. Second time in the last 3 years he suffered the same injury. Toure led the Scarlet Knights in both tackles for loss and sacks last year. And remember, their other star linebacker, Tyreen Powell's recovering from an Achilles injury. A tough blow there, Yogi, likely will not affect them this week against Howard, although in fairness, Howard did give Northwestern a pretty good game last year when they played them, and that was a good Northwestern team in the end, as we know. But what are you looking for, kind of big picture from Rutgers here in the opener?
Well, I think you kind of nailed it. And if I was the staff, I'd do exactly what you referenced. You showed them the Northwestern game from last year, right? This isn't just your traditional non-conference opponent. This team has a lot of talent when you dive into them. The matchups is what I'm most interested in. And then I think the offense, of course, right? What does this new look offense look like? We were there in training camp. You saw different tempos. You saw Ethan Kaliak-Manis play well. You guys know how I feel about the word discernment at that position. That's the number one thing I'll be looking for on Thursday night, is that by him. Whether it's a variety of tempos, whether it's certain situations, because this is the type of game where, yes, there are expectations. You have an opportunity to win more games than you have in the past. You don't have, the giants that you've had to play every single year in the recent history in the Big Ten. So how do you navigate all that? Because if you give Howard some time and some breathing room, they'll do what they did in Northwestern, which will scare the daylights out of you. So I look forward to it. I think, if my math is right, it's the 1,410th game played in program history in the birthplace of college football, man. So lots to be excited about, and I expect this team to be dialed and focused under Greg Schiano.
I'm going to trust Yogi's math on that. I'm not
just going to go with it?
Yeah,
right.
It seems right. 14-10. Yeah.
He's a bright individual.
Yeah, he is.
I tell you this, we watched Kaliak-Manis throw the ball around in the rain while we were there in the summer, and we're really impressed by it. So much so, it was like, hey, maybe he's turned the corner. The other thing that's important here, he's been named a team captain, which is significant for a quarterback to walk into a new environment and gain all the respect of his teammates. So a lot will be on his shoulders, and I'm gonna tell you what, he'll be able to lean on that run game.
Yeah.
Right? He should be able to. They're good. They've gotten much better and more solid up front. I think they'll be able to run and have some success there.
It is nice when you have the Big Ten's leading returning rusher and Kyle Monungai you can turn and hand the ball to, so that'll certainly be a big part of what they do. After that game, we're going to be in Champaign, and we're not the only ones who are going to be there. NBA first-round pick Terrence Shannon Jr. will be at the opener trying to fire up the Illini fans. They'll take on Eastern Illinois, just the third ever meeting between those two schools, which are separated by about 50 miles. Yogi, what interests you the most about the Illini?
Well, look, they're playing a team that is top 25 FCS program. So again, scary game. You look at what Illinois did last year. I think they had 5 one-score games. So if this thing is tight, how do you navigate? I think immediately, of course, you're going to go to this offense. Can they control the line of scrimmage? They want to run the football. What can Luke Altmaier do in this system? I often talk about discernment. Also, you got to be able to control the ball. So I want to see spot throws. And if Illinois, who I think is another dangerous team, much like Rutgers this season, they'll be a tough out for everybody. He's going to have to be able to hit spots. So how is he? What is his comfortability in this offense? Again, what does this system look like? We know they have a ton of work to do defensively from last year to now, but I want to see if it's a tight game. How does he deal with critical moments on critical situations throughout the ballgame?
Yeah, you talk about some third down situations. Being able to find Pat Bryant, I think, will be huge for them. He'll be the #1 wide receiver on this team this year, and that's going to be significant. But he's got to do a much better job of taking care of the football in critical downs. 10 interceptions last year. They've got to get off to a fast start offensively.
Turnovers in general, huge issue for this team last year. They committed too many and did not generate nearly as many as they wanted to, and that kind of speaks to the defense. Remember, first in the nation scoring defense 2 years ago, 12th in the Big Ten last year. So we'll see if the defense bounces back, as Yogi alluded to as well. Back on Big Ten today, Minnesota's Darius Taylor only played in 6 games last year, but when he was out there, there was literally no running back in the nation who ate up more yardage. Number 1 with better than 133 yards per game. Now, he had injury issues last year, which is why he only played 6 games. He got banged up in a portion of practice that was open to the media last week. PJ Fleck didn't really elaborate on his status for the opener against North Carolina, so that's something to monitor, obviously, throughout the week. And, Yogi, this is a good measuring stick game for Minnesota. This is a solid North Carolina team, one that beat them handily a year ago. Now you get the game in Minneapolis. What are you focused on?
Well, thankfully, Drake May's not playing for Carolina, as well as the 5 offensive linemen in front of him. We're seeing what he's doing in the preseason, and I think that's going to bode well for Minnesota and their new-look defense. And this is a defense that has to show out, especially in the red zone and on third down. So I want to see what exotic packages do they throw at potentially 2 quarterbacks they'll see for Carolina. Offensively, of course, we want to see Max Brosmer. What does this transfer do? A chip on his shoulder. We've seen all the things all summer long, how he's leaned into his teammates and how they're following his guidance and leadership. Now let's go see it on the field. I expect this offense to be dramatically better. If their lead back is out, more may fall on his shoulders, but definitely in critical D&Ds, it's going to fall on his shoulders. He's going to have to elevate this team. They're going to go in this new look league as far as I think their quarterback takes them.
Yeah, I think one of the things you notice about this Minnesota team traditionally under PJ Fleck is he's had some running backs that are going to be able to step up if they need to be able to do that. But I'd say the important part is to make sure that they can get off the field in third down situations. 12 of 17 last year. I know it's a different offense for North Carolina, but you've got to be able to address the third down situation.
And just in general, defense. They took a step back last year. Corey Heatherman comes in as the new defensive coordinator. They took a step back. They went from being fabulous to being solid defensively. But PJ Fleck's had better than solid defenses historically. So interested to see what that group looks like. And we mentioned Max Brosmer. He is one of 9 transfer quarterbacks. It was a good chance of starting the season opener in the Big Ten. You see some of the QB newcomers here. It's a list that includes Will Howard at Ohio State, Dylan Gabriel, of course, at Oregon, Washington's Will Rogers on there, Michigan State's Aiden Childs at the very front of that list. And Yogi, as we move to Friday's action, Michigan State, really intriguing team. We just saw them last week. They were a really bad offensive team last year. In fact, if you go to scoring average in the Power 5, Iowa was the only team in the power conferences that averaged fewer points per game than Michigan State. But a whole new year, obviously new coaching staff and Jonathan Smith. You've got Childs, who you saw during his time at Oregon State, coming over. What do we think of Michigan State and where they stand as they try to rebuild this thing and get it headed in the right direction again?
Well, it's a fun matchup against Tom Herman and company. And I think Aiden Childs looks like some of those quarterbacks that Coach Herman coached when he was at Ohio State. I mean, Aiden Childs, to me, if you took an anonymous poll among all 18 teams and said, you can have this dude for the next 2 or 3 years, I bet 90% of the coaches would take him. Right? Take away Dylan Gabriel, maybe take away Dylan Raiola, but I think he's that type of player. He was that dynamic in high school. He had flashes at Oregon State. I think being around him, we saw his ability. I had practice that day, talking to the staff. They rave about his accuracy, his acumen. If you saw social media, you know his confidence. I think he said, hey, take the over if you're looking at this game. So I'm a big fan of watching him compete. I just think to temper expectations. It's 61 new players. I don't care who you are. It could be Jonathan Smith. You could be Pete Carroll. You could be Bill Belichick. It's still hard to acclimatize to a dramatically new roster in year one with all the turnover and even turmoil they went through. So I think it's going to be a process. Step one is this game. I don't think it's going to be easy. Charlie Fry, the offensive coordinator, you remember him from Akron and, of course, in the NFL. Rock Bellantoni is their defensive coordinator. He's been all over the country in college football. He will call an aggressive game. So Aiden Childs, he'll have to play more than, I think, the 91 career snaps he's played thus far in his young career. How does he navigate when it gets hard, when there's lulls? Those will be all the things he'll learn and grow from, but you're going to be looking at, I think, an emerging star in college football.
And I think that's one of the keys, to be patient as a fan, to be patient as a coaching staff. It's a little bit different when you know you're only going to get a couple of series in a game and then be able to run out there and be able to handle it. You obviously know in most cases what you're going to be up against. Now he's going to be out there each and every down, and it's going to be critical for him to be able to be patient, not try to make the big plays, take exactly what defenses are giving him, and then he can have the success and build the confidence and the momentum that you need to build in young quarterbacks.
A lot of room for improvement. In fact, a lot of room for improvement on both sides of the ball. Frankly, they were bottom 2 in the Big Ten last year, both total offense and total defense. As you guys were talking about, a ton of new faces. So fascinated to see how it all comes together, starting with that game against FAU. So we have that game here on the Big Ten Network. Over on FS1, they have a Friday night game as well. It is Wisconsin in action. They will be taking on Western Michigan. It will be the Badger debut for Tyler Van Dyke, former ACC Rookie of the Year in Miami. Up and down career there. In fairness, he went through 3 OCs in 3 seasons. Now he comes to Madison. He'll work with Phil Longo. Remember, Longo's offense averaged less than 24 points per game last year. That was the fewest for the Badgers in 19 years. Pretty tough schedule, including Alabama, as we know, in the non-conference. It feels to me like, Yogi, they're kind of banking on, hey, year one, we're getting our feet wet in the new system, new offense, new defense, new head coach, a lot of changes, and kind of banking on this notion that year two, everyone has a better sense of what we're doing, and you improve just by virtue of familiarity.
Yeah, I think the big takeaways from talking to you guys and watching the training camp shows is this team feels as though they have a foundation that's pretty solid. And I think when you're talking about the air raid offense that you just referenced, it's really important. And Howard, you and I talk about this all the time on our bus as we were traveling around the Midwest. It's a philosophy, not a scheme. Everybody's air raid does not look like Mike Leach's or Lincoln Riley's or Cliff Kingsbury. Same deal here at Wisconsin. So for Tyler Van Dyke, it's all about, for him, getting the ball out and getting it out efficiently, because their opponent, led by Lance Taylor, the head coach, his background is running the rock. Christian McCaffrey, a notable guy that he coached at Stanford. He coached him in the NFL in Carolina, and they've got a good run game as well. And the way you beat the air raid is you force a couple 3-and-outs, you run the football, and limit possessions. So right now, if you're Wisconsin heading into this ball game, to me, it's all about efficiency within this scheme. Checking the ball down, getting the ball out of your hands quickly, not taking poor sacks. And Tyler Van Dyke, he's got a lot of experience. I look forward to watching a reemergence of him, probably the better version of himself than what we saw at his most recent stop, because confidence gets impacted at the quarterback position. Now, based on what you guys shared, what we've learned from talking to people there, his confidence should be at an extremely high level. And in this game, he'll get tested early, get the ball out, keep the sticks moving, get a couple early scores, because I don't think you'll have a lot of possessions.
I think they'll be able to really hang their hat on the defensive side. Coach Tressel, I think, continues to do an unbelievable job of developing that team. He didn't have his entire system in last year, but he started to get there. And as we saw him this summer, I think they're much closer. I think on the offensive side, when you talk about Yogi getting rid of the football, it's going to be important. You can't take sacks. They've got to be able to continue to move the ball and help their defense out.
A little bit lower expectations than we're used to with the Badgers. Last 4 years, they've started the season ranked and finished unranked. That won't happen this year because they do not start the system ranked. An unranked Wisconsin team heading into the year. Well, no one there is satisfied with how the last few seasons have ended in Columbus. It is fair to point out that Ryan Day's tenure with Ohio State has had overwhelmingly more ups than downs. His Buckeyes have lost just 8 times in his first 5 full seasons. His win percentage of .875 is the highest by any FBS coach this century who's coached at least 50 games, with Kirby Smart, Urban Meyer, and Nick Saban, the next 3 on the list. It's an amazing list, right? And so we asked Ryan Day about this at camp. If you remember, do you take any pride in this? And he said no.
No.
Absolutely not.
No.
We were talking about this last week as well on the show. And I think when you look at this week, guys, or this season, I should say, for them, it's clearly beat Michigan or bust. It's make the playoff or bust. To a certain extent, I don't know if it's win the national championship or bust, but I think
talk to them, it's win the national title.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think it's in that realm of possibility that if you don't win it, you look at it as an unsuccessful year. That's a tough place to be, Yogi. Let's talk about the opener first against Akron. All due respect, doesn't feel like it's going to be a particularly close game. So What do you focus on in week one? To you, is it offensive line and quarterback? Is there more to it than that? What are the things you'll have in your line of sight there?
Yeah, well, I think everybody says the same thing, which is nameless, faceless opponent. I had a chance to connect with Joe Moorhead earlier this morning, and he knows the task that is up in front of his team. With that said, I think for Ohio State, it really is about efficiency, execution, and opportunity. Why do I say opportunity? Because we've talked to Ryan Day enough times now where we say, do they feel that pressure? Do they feel that Michigan or Natty or bust? And he said, you know what? We look at it as what a cool opportunity. What an opportunity to represent this school, represent this team, and everybody who came back. I mean, for years, you guys have covered this team where the best players were 3 and out. Now it's 3 and run it back one more time. And I think that's going to be really fun to watch this thing. So, yes, of course, Will Howard, my eyes will be there. What is Chip Kelly going to do? Do I anticipate all the bags of Chip Kelly's offense coming out? Zero chance. We're not going to see all the tricks that he has. We're not going to see all the tools that they have. But I anticipate to watch a real confident Will Howard. I look forward to watching one of the best run games in the country. I think this offensive line is pretty talented. I know that's the one area you can say, hey, what are they going to be like this year? I think they're still really gifted up front, and they are a special team. So how do they execute? And I think the last thing I'll look for is their celebrations. I think the best teams celebrate with one another. Like, where is the vicarious joy coming from? And if you feel the pressure, sometimes I call it exhale wins, where you win the game or you score the touchdown, it's, whew, thank God we got that. I want to see this team ride together, celebrate together, jump on the sideline together. Those are the things that showcase the championship culture, mentality. I think this team has that, and that's what I'll be looking forward to when they compete.
Yeah, I think when we look at Ohio State, we can talk about the line of scrimmage or the offensive line, where they need to improve, but this is a game that they should be able to go out and dominate. Then you go to Will Howard. This is a situation where he should go out and be able to have the success. He's had success in his past. There's no question about that, but being the starting quarterback in Columbus is a different animal all in itself. And he'll have to learn that process as he goes through it. But playing this particular game will gain that momentum, that confidence that he's going to need. And also, when Yogi talks about just watching the excitement of this team and how they move around, I also want to see him with a workman-like attitude as they go out and compete this weekend.
I mean, the thing that I find so interesting that you kind of are both touching on is how many players chose to come back, right? You have 7 first or second team, all Big Ten picks, who could have gone to the NFL, who came back for their senior year. That speaks to, A, the unfinished business, and kind of echoing the sentiment of Ryan Day that, no, we're not satisfied with just winning a lot of football games. We need to win the right football games. But I think it also speaks to what Yogi's talking about and what you're alluding to, too, which is the camaraderie in this team and guys with that common purpose. They were picked first by 21 of the 27 voters in the unofficial Big Ten preseason poll. The other 6 first-place votes went to Oregon. The Ducks got arguably the best transfer QB in the nation in Dylan Gabriel. He's been at UCF and Oklahoma, has thrown for nearly 15,000 career yards. That's the 7th most in FBS history. His 125 career TD passes are the most nationally among active players by 31. He has a chance to break the NCAA record for career starts, a record, of course, set by his predecessor, Bo Nix. Yogi, I cannot wait for these two to go head-to-head on October 12th, but we got a lot of football between now and then, starting with the Vandals. You've been covering Oregon for a long time. Give us a little insight into what you are most interested in as they kind of begin that climb to potentially being a college football playoff and maybe even a national championship team.
Well, we get the gift of calling that one on the Big Ten Network this weekend. So we'll be flying up there Thursday. We'll have another in-depth look under the hood at this program. But I'll tell you this, you guys are going to get annoyed every time I say this all year, because every Monday I'm going to come on and I'm going to say, Oregon football, connection, growth, toughness, and sacrifice. Those are their DNA traits, and I think they are dramatically reflected in every area of this program. Connection. Talk about Dylan Gabriel. What he's done mirrors what a lot of transfer quarterbacks do. Is how are you going to pour into your guys? What did he do that was so unique? Instead of getting a Maserati, he decided to get a van so he could put the receivers and tight ends in and drive them around all summer, making sure that their timing and their anticipation and the playbook was completely connected to one another. I look at this team defensively, And I just think that, like Ohio State and Penn State, they're different than everybody else, at least that my eyes saw defensively. I know I didn't get a chance to go to Iowa like you guys did, but they're unique. They've got 10 second-year, as in sophomore, defensive linemen. Some are redshirt freshmen, some are true sophomores. But bottom line, they are loaded on the defensive front, and you're going to have to be with what we know is the CFP and the expanded season. 15, 16, 17 possible games for this team. And I look around, I don't see many chinks in their armor. They're not world class at every position. They're not a first rounder at every position. But gosh, I look at the 22 starters. I think everybody's going to find their way to a training camp. Some second, third day picks, some may be free agents. But this roster is worth the hype. And Ohio State and Oregon, at least from my lens, man, they are two different monsters right now in college football and in this league.
When you start to think about this Oregon team over the last couple of years, it's been a team that's been physical. They've been put together to be a physical football team, and you only need to look to Coach Lanning's background at Alabama and Georgia to understand what type of team he wants to put out on the football field. So that's going to be significant. For me, I want to watch the line of scrimmage. I'm not one of those that is buying into the West Coast teams of more finesse. I think they're physical out there, and they're going to have an opportunity really for the Midwest or our Big Ten footprint for people to get a true understanding of just how talented this team is. And they're just not talented, right? They also can get physical and will get in the phone booth and beat you up if you're not careful.
The big thing that stands out to me is I think, like for a lot of Big Ten fans, and I would count myself in this group, the last time you really studied Oregon and watched them closely in preparation for a game was when they played Ohio State for the national championship in the first year of the college football playoff. And that was a line of scrimmage mismatch. Ohio State won that game at the line of scrimmage. So then last year, when we know that Oregon's coming into the Big Ten, one of the things I did every week was DVR all of these teams every week, right? And you didn't. I wasn't able to watch every game. I don't know what you did. I tried to watch as much as I could and get a sense for them. And I was blown away by how good they were on defense, and how different they were under Dan Lanning than they had been when we saw them in 2014. This is Tosh Lupoi has a really good defense. They held 7 opponents to 10 points or fewer last year. They're good.
He knows a little bit about defense, and he also knows a whole heck of a lot about putting a roster together because he was one of the main recruiters at Alabama.
Yeah, they've done pretty well, too. Now, I'm fascinated to watch this team. I'm fascinated to see how they match up with the rest of the Big Ten. And offensively, I mean, you lose Bo Nix and you replace him with Dylan Gabriel. Holy cow. Pat Kraft will remain in-state college for the foreseeable future. Penn State announcing today the school's AD has agreed to a new deal that will keep him in his position through 2032. Kraft came to Penn State from Boston College just over 2 years ago. High expectations for Penn State football this year. Won 10 games last season. Bring back one of the best running back tandems in the nation, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen. Those two will be following the play calls of new OC Andy Kotelnicki, who came from Kansas in the offseason, and they have a really big test right off the bat. They're going to West Virginia, one of the best matchups in all of the country in week 1. So, Yogi, how do they escape Morgantown with a win? What do they need to do?
Keep your helmet on. I wore that helmet back there every time I go to Morgantown. We played them twice in college, and it is a raucous environment, to say the least. But it's amazing, right? Especially to kick off the season. What do they need to do? I think they need to make sure this defense with Abdul Carter and company, Zane Durant, who I just love on the interior defensive line, they need to shut down Garrett Green. Garrett Green is one of the more dynamic quarterbacks Penn State will face all season long. Saw him over the summer. This guy and his teammates are juiced and primed for this home game to kick off the season. So that's number 1. And then 2, of course, we all want to see the offense. Andy Kotelnicki, Drew Aller, they got 2 of the best backs in America. But what can this receiving core do? If they want to make noise in the playoff, we might not see it from jump, but we're going to have to see it. I keep going back to this, man. Critical downs and distances. You could chart it at home. If you want to win a tight game, you've got to make 3 elite throws in the second half. I'm talking about spot throws on that front shoulder. Not out here, not low. What can Drew Aller do in a big-time matchup? I think he's going to play great. I think he's been calloused. I think what he went through last year, phone number getting leaked, challenging games against the top teams they played. I look forward to seeing him bounce back. I think he went through some adversity. I think he's scarred up a little bit, and I really want to see this offense.
Yeah, you're talking about being scarred up. We look at this offensive line. They were much better, but they have to be able to run the ball and get those explosive plays out of the run game, which they've really lacked. It wasn't just the pass game. It was the run game as well. They've got to be able to control the line of scrimmage, and if they can do that with the two talented backs, I think they'll be just fine. And you talk about Drew Aller being able to make some of those throws. It's going to be critical that he makes those throws on the road because it's always a difficult place. Major Harris isn't on the other sideline. I go way back on you there.
Oh, yeah.
But
Great West Virginia quarterback of the
past. The guy in the
past.
center right now for them is really, really talented, and they're going to have to be able to turn the football over.
And West Virginia, this is not a series they've had really any success in. They played 61 times. They've won 9 of them all time. They feel like this is one they can compete in and one they can win in. And I think you guys are both kind of touching on similar themes, which is, can you stretch the field to open up the lanes for those running backs? Because to your point, Howard, the explosion in the run game decreased dramatically a season ago from where it had been the previous year. Penn State knows who its QB is going to be. Michigan had a quarterback battle raging throughout camp. Alex Orji and Davis Warren battling it out. They look to replace Big Ten QB of the year, J.J. McCarthy. Neither is particularly experienced. Orji has thrown 1 career pass. Warren has thrown 14. He was 0 of 5 with a pick last season. Jack Tuttle has the most experience in that room, but he is still recovering from an injury. We brought you a little bit of that news conference off the top of the show. Sharon Moore, we were talking about the notice of allegations with the NCAA. We did want to update you. He was asked about it once during the news conference, didn't really get into any specifics with the media that was gathered there. So obviously we'll continue to follow that story. Let's talk about his team, Yogi, a team in transition. So is Fresno State. Jeff Tedford, who was the coach there, unfortunately had to step down due to health concerns here in the preseason. Fresno is a team that is thought very highly of coming into this year, but certainly some unknowns there. Obviously, with Michigan, we know that the defense is largely a known commodity. Offense, a lot of questions at the skill positions. What do you think here?
Well, I think Fresno State's going to come ready to play. I mean, out here in California, they have a phrase that's been going around about 30, 40 years there of like anyone, anytime, anywhere. I mean, that's just kind of what the Fresno State vibe is, just to get everybody in Ann Arbor ready. They're not going to come in intimidated by the environment. They'll respect it. But I think when you look at them schematically, they're going to be really sound, much like Michigan will. I think when I look at quarterback, at least coming off of practice and seeing the size, productivity, the unique traits that Alex Orji has, I don't know how he doesn't play, right? He's going to have an influence within this ballgame. Yeah, big thumbs up for me in that regard. How much? We'll see, right? Where does Davis Warren do? I think the scary part of this game for me, if I'm Michigan, against a Fresno team that they got better receiver in the portal, they think they can run the football, they like their quarterback, is that if all of a sudden you go 3 and out and just possessions start getting limited, that's where you get scared. They should lean on Fresno State. They should wear them out throughout the majority of this ball game. But QB, I can't wait to watch Alex Orji play. I think Davis Warren will get his shot. And they've got a schedule that is not easy, right? It's not Ohio State where they have the first 3 games kind of like an NFL preseason. They got Texas coming to town next week. So the decisions, I'd imagine, were already made in terms of who's playing and how they're playing, but I wouldn't be shocked to see both quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think we'll see both. It's just, I think just the process. When we were there, no one was really out in front of one another, but I do believe Orji gives them the best opportunity to go out and win games when you talk about the upside that he has. Donovan Edwards would be a big part of that offensive line. You talked about being able to lean on their opponent. I think this is a talented offensive line. Coach Newsom has done a great job of really getting them going, and I think it'll be important for them to run the football and really set the tempo and set the expectations for what needs to happen at Michigan football.
And I think we all left Michigan camp feeling like the defense would be solid, maybe even better than solid, maybe very good. A group that led the nation in total defense and scoring defense a year ago. I want to ask both of you guys, what's success for Michigan this year? Like, what could you look at? Do they need to make the playoff? Is that realistic? Or could they have a year where you say they went 9-3, they didn't quite make it, or went 8-4, but it was still a good year and Sharon Moore set his foundation? Yogi, I'll ask you that first. What do you think?
Well, I think it's kind of a TBD because we're in a new era of college football. Like the portal's been around for a little while, NIL's been around for a little while, but nowhere near what it is now. So I think expectations for blue blood programs like Ohio State, like Michigan, like SC, there's just a standard there, and especially coming off a natty and a win and everything that did momentum-wise for this program, and of course Sharon Moore now being the head coach. I think the fan base, like every fan base, probably expects them to either repeat or get back to the playoff. I think for me, it's going to be all about the development of these quarterbacks, and especially in week 2. I comp them a lot to Bama last year. Remember Alabama last year? They played Texas at home, and they didn't really have their quarterback thing figured out. Took a couple weeks, but then by week 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way through the end of the season, they became one of the more talented teams in the country. I think Michigan's going to have an opportunity like that because this position, look, you got to grow at it. You got to play. You got to play in games. Neither one of the guys that will play on Saturday have any dramatic amount of snaps in meaningful games, at least in totality of series after series after series.
Yeah, I think this is a team, when you look at it, the bar will be raised each and every week. The more momentum, the wins that they put together, when we see this team continue to improve, the quarterback play to continue to improve, I think to be in the playoffs would be huge for them.
It'd be amazing.
It would be unbelievable. But you think about there's a system in place right now, and I think that's one of the reasons this coaching staff seems so relaxed and so calm. The players have responded to what they've been taught and how they've been coached to this point. So I expect the bar to continue to move when you talk about Michigan, but if they can make the 14 playoffs, it will be a significant really hurdle to cross.
Really interested to have this discussion 2 weeks from now. Yeah. Like there are a lot of teams you don't learn a lot in those first couple weeks. Fresno State, Texas, we're going to learn an awful lot about where things stand with Michigan. News from the conference office in Rosemont, we have tiebreakers for football. Remember, the top 2 teams in the Big Ten get to the champ game this year, no divisions. So how do you separate teams with identical records? This is how. It starts with head-to-head, then your record against all common conference opponents. If they're still tied there, you go with head-to-head against the common opponent with the best conference record, and then you work your way down from there with common opponents. A couple more tiebreakers, including analytics. And against all odds, if it's still tied then, we've got a random draw. But I like our chances of breaking it before the random draw. I don't think we're really going to come to that. So anyway, you've got it all there. It's a lot to digest, and I would suggest that for those of you who aren't speed readers, maybe you go on the website and check it out there. But, guys, we have 6 Big Ten teams in the top 25 in the preseason. And I guess I want to ask you, we did this preseason tour, and we learn a lot. And one of the things I think we all try to do is to kind of tier the teams and figure out where does everyone stack up and who are they most comparable to. So I would ask you this, Yogi, and Howard, I want to get your response as well. How much difference is there between Iowa, the bottom of the top 25, number 25 team in the country, and the other 12 teams? Like, how much separates 6 from 18?
Yeah, it's such a nuanced conversation because then you start looking at the schedule. Like, I've got this beautiful schedule right here with all the games, and I'm just on it every day. All right, who would do against this team? How would they do against that team? And then, oh, by the way, Rutgers doesn't play some of the same teams that UW has to play, for instance. So I think that's the reality. I think we'd be better off every Monday having like a power rankings versus an actual rankings because it's going to be hard based on Purdue's record. I think Purdue's going to be a pretty good football team. I think Purdue has a dramatically more challenging schedule than, say, Rutgers when you just look at it today. So that's going to be the thing. But I love it because every week it's going to be challenging. And we know somebody 6 through 18 will knock off one of those teams at the top.
Yeah, I think one of the things you look at and what's going to separate them, in reality, is it's going to come down to quarterback play and the health of teams. They're going to have to stay healthy. They're going to have to be able to get younger players developed to be able to get them the reps that they need so that as the season progresses, they're able to plug some of those young players or inexperienced players in if they need to. But when you look at a team like Iowa, it's really about quarterback play, right? They're right there. Can they take that next step? When you talk about Nebraska, the schedule, but it's the quarterback that everyone's focused on. And we know they'll be good on the defensive side, but what can the young fella do under center? We'll all be watching.
It's quarterbacks, it's coaching, it's those 3 or 4 big plays in a game when your team and the other team have like talent. It's turnovers, it's injuries.
Little special teams in there as well.
All that good stuff. Yogi, this was fun. We'll be doing this every Monday this year. We hope you will join us.